I don't know either where this atmosphere comes from. Maybe because so many poets used to live here. The emperors, mandarins and courtiers displayed the same lyrical, romantic feelings. Certainly the amount of rain we get gives rise to melancholy. It makes time flow as slowly as the river. In fact, the Song Huang, the perfume river, has a lot to do with it. When it's shrouded by the autumn mists, you can feel how it imposes its own atmosphere on Hue. The perfume river is the subject of thousands of poems, and I think nothing has changed since the days when it inspired the architects to build this poetic city. In that golden age, when Hue was the imperial city, the heart and capital of Vietnam. In the early 19th century, Vietnam's last imperial dynasty was founded by Gia Long. He had a new capital built on the perfume river on the Chinese model. For 143 years, the 13 emperors of the Nguyen dynasty reigned in Hue. First in great splendor, then in decline and decadence, obsequious puppets of the French colonial power. He lives in the house of a princess. His daughter studies Vietnamese music at a conservatoire. He doesn't want new furniture. The house is furnished, built in the classical Hue style. The tablets on the columns are inscribed with poems about Hue. Pan Tuan An is the Hue city historian. He devoted himself to the culture of the imperial age at a time when revolutionary Vietnam still found it difficult to appreciate. Hue in central Vietnam lies in beautiful countryside on a bend in the Perfume River. Work began in 1802 and went on for 30 years. Armies of workers created a citadel defended by cannon with walls 11 kilometers in total length. Inside, a city within the city, again surrounded by ditches and walls, the imperial city itself, with palaces, temples and ministries. During the 19th century, while the rest of the world was entering a new age, a Chinese-style feudal court was taking shape once more in Hue.
The Nguyen were the last imperial dynasty of Vietnam, and they ruled at a time when colonialism was already knocking at the door of our strictly Confucian civilization. We had adopted this from China 2,000 years earlier. Writing, culture, state organization, the monarchy with the emperor as the son of heaven. Mandarins as civil servants. China was our mentor, a hard master who long ruled over us and from whom we had liberated ourselves. That's important. I think too that in seeking harmony with nature, our architecture is more modest than its Chinese model.
Ngo Mon, the mighty southern gate of the imperial city. From its balustrade, parades were reviewed, judgments passed down, and the lunar calendar proclaimed. On the base of the city walls, the 5-phoenix pavilion rests on exactly 100 pillars. The number symbolizes the indefinite, or indeed infinite, rule of the emperor. Only the emperor himself was permitted to walk through the midday gate, as it was known. Dien Tai Hua, the Palace of Supreme Harmony, the Imperial Audience Hall. Coronations and birthdays were celebrated here, and twice a month the ruler gathered his mandarins about him. 80 ironwood columns with the finest lacquer each depict 9 dragons, the emperor's symbolic beast, as well as clouds, the sign that his reign was legitimized by heaven. In 1945, on the balustrade of the midday gate, the last emperor handed over power to Ho Chi Minh, and the colors of revolutionary Vietnam were raised. Two wars awaited the country's people, first against France and then against the United States. The city on the Perfume River was hit particularly hard by both. The imperial city has long since lost its erstwhile importance. With its multitude of mopeds and rickshaws, Hue today is as bustling as any other city in Vietnam. The markets are overflowing. Hue's famous cuisine still recalls the imperial age, as do the many high school girls in the classic white áo đai. Hue was and is a city of education, and even today, it's the heart of Vietnamese Buddhism. The Great Bell can be heard from 10 kilometers away. Tien Mu, just outside the city, is Hue's oldest pagoda. Its 7-story tower symbolizes the 7 incarnations of the Buddha. The pagoda, situated directly on the riverbank, is one of the hallmarks of Hue. It was here that a woman from heaven, Tien Mu, is said to have prophesied to the Nguyen rulers where their new city would be. In the Vietnam War, Tien Mu was the pagoda of resistance. Preserved as a relic is the car in which the first monk to burn himself in protest drove to Saigon. At the center of every house is the altar of the ancestors. Deceased family members are still present even after their death. They are involved, consulted, venerated. Hue, the veneration of ancestors, is at the root of Vietnamese religiosity. In popular religion, it's combined with spirit worship. There are thousands of spirit shrines in the city. The ancestor cult merged with later religions and doctrines such as Taoism, Confucianism, and above all with Buddhism. During imperial times, Buddhism was the state religion. All the emperors were Buddhists. They founded most of the Buddhist monasteries. There are 300 pagodas in Hue. Twice a month, Pan Tuan An goes to Tu Hue Pagoda with his wife. It's situated in a pine wood outside the city, an oasis of meditative calm. Founded in 1843, it was the pagoda of the imperial eunuchs.
I think the cultural heritage of Hue consists not only in its buildings, but also in its intellectual culture.
The Tay Temple in the imperial city houses the ancestral shrines of the Nguyen dynasty, set up in rows. Between the first strong emperors and the later puppet emperors of the French is the shrine of the 4th Hue emperor, whose tragedy explains much of the city's melancholy. He was hardly 1.50 meters tall, of gentle manner, highly educated, sickly and childless. His name was Tu Duc.
He wrote 4,000 verses and 600 prose pieces. He was a good poet, but a weak emperor. It was during his reign that the French seized the country. After that, the imperial court became merely an operetta. Whether a stronger man could have saved the country, it is difficult to say. Tu Duc, oppressed by guilt, fled from reality and withdrew to his own mausoleum, which, like all emperors, he'd had built in his lifetime.
Some kilometers from the city lie the imperial graves of Hue. For the emperors, earthly life was merely a transitional phase. They constructed palatial mausoleums surrounded by parks, lotus ponds and pavilions where their souls would have a fitting, appropriate residence after their death. Tu Duc used his tomb before he died. He sat here writing and reciting poetry by the lotus pond, across which he would have himself rowed by night when the moon was full. For his mother, his wife, and his 104 concubines, he built temples and living quarters. He had tea brewed from morning dew. The opulent banquets were accompanied by music and poetry. But this luxury did little to lighten the two dukes' melancholy. A forecourt with a guard of honor of stone mandarins leads to a pavilion, behind which is the actual grave. In the pavilion is a massive stele, on which are engraved in 5,000 characters two dukes' confession, which he himself composed.
I was born weak and sickly, and to my shame I have begotten no children. Only hesitantly did I take over the government from my father. I name my grave, Grave of Humility.
Ôi sự huệ ngàn năm con của
O Hue, sorrowful girl, come here and forget reality. Why are you so sad where everyone else is so joyful? The words of one classical poem of imperial times. To this day, the mood in Vietnam's imperial city has remained a little contemplative, withdrawn, melancholic. Hue is the place where sadness smiles and joy weeps.